The impact of the joint state in Asia is lot reduced these days, but it yet has one impressive map it can act. How comes in the shape of the deploy of a transporter hit team, a marine fleet focused on one of 11 gigantic excellent carriers, float nuke-powered air bases more than rather than 300 meter length, transport quite air force to align a little town. The US-Vietnam convergence dates behind to the recovery of tactful relations in 1995. With later down there has been a stable enhancement in bonds, via trading, culture exchanges, public diplomacy and war company operation. Disagreements above the severe treat of policy and sectarian dissidents in Vietnam include not been permitted to violate the development, and down there is a wonderful lack of recriminations above the history. The reality how the USS Carl Vinson is dock fare a few many kilometers of the bathing beach wherever US fight military at first landing in Vietnam in 1965, and not far of several of the bloodiest battlefields of the warfare, presents a acute historical background to the trip, but in no way overshadows it. The is the peak of a peaceful, cautious suit. The growth of China is which drives it, for the Americans and for the Vietnamese. In spite the superior known story of the US-Vietnam dispute, Vietnamese indignation of its gigantic neighbor goes behind lot future, embedded in the national RAM of a millennium of China dominance in old times. Vietnam shares a boundary more than rather than 1,000 kilometer, 620 miles, length in China, via that more than rather than $90 bn, pound 65 bn, in trading passes, but that in 1979 was the stage of a brief war in that thousands of military dead on both of sides. The two communistic parties one day enjoyed a brotherly partnership, as shut as labia and gearing, they utilized to tell. Later they bring down out for the Chinese-Soviet break in the medium 1970s, Vietnam selecting the Soviets Association as a patron saint, and above Vietnam's intrusion of Cambodia in 1978 to displace the China-backed Cambodian blush mode. How hostile relation just modified following the crash of the Soviets Association in the deceased 1980s constrained Vietnam's communistic management to reconsider their stance in the planet and set a overseas politics relying, they told, on amity independently of ideologic affiliation. At how period they put a lot of tactful force in restoration bridges in China. But their differences above the southward China Sea remained a issue. Both of countries declared components of the Paracel and Spratly Islands, and include on event fought above them. Powerful against Chinese mood put fair under the shallow in Vietnam, and is readily mixed up. In 2014 protests above China's deploy of an oil rig in contested water set off forcible protests in Vietnam targeting which they believed were China-owned factories. It was versus a background of growing China self-confidence in the southward China Sea following 2002 how Vietnam began achieving out to its excess enemy. How was while China coordinated to a proclamation of hold in the Associate of Southward East Asiatic Nations, ASEAN, 4 persons of whose members declared islands in the contested water, that was imaginary to stop isle grabs and building on coralline atolls. But how has not stopped China house air bases, rocket bunkers and radar gun stations to strengthen its conduct on the islands. Stray by wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was just in a milestone speaking by Secretariat of Country Hillary Clinton at ASEAN in July 2010 how the U.S. pronounced its concern in supporting liberty of navigate in the southward China Ocean, and in possessing contested adjudicated via World Act. Next how speaking, the Obama authority announced a road behind to southward East Asia. Driving nearer to Vietnam was a mandrel portion of how. In 2016, for a country trip to Hanoi, CEO Barack Obama announced the lift of all restrictions on turnover of war machinery to Vietnam, and the recent heritage of the Vietnam warfare. Vietnam was as well side to the Transport Pacific Association, a offered complementary trading team of 12 countries championed by CEO Obama as a way of designing U.S. impact and values in an area wherever it had been loser land to China. So the judgment by CEO Donald Trump card to leave the TPP was a strike to Vietnam, a powerful stakeholder of the transactions. Irrepressible, Main Secretary Nguyen Xuyen Phuc uncertainly he was the at first southward East Asiatic lead to trip CEO Trump card in Washington in May recent year, and later posted him for the APEC Summit Conference in November. Compliance the U.S. betrothed is yet a precedence for Vietnam, portion of a subtle and thin web of tactful initiatives designed at manufacturing its friendships as shut as they can be out of antagonizing its all-important relation in China. The U.S. does not yet include a strategy association in Vietnam. But the U.S. war has been studying new areas of company operation in its Vietnamese peer pressure. So far these include substantially been in non-traditional aspects of defense, love world keeping, and calamity answer. Down there has been no say yet of the various of collaborative war exercises the U.S. conducts in allies love Japan, Southward Korea, and the Philippines, nor has Vietnam shown any concern yet in purchasing considerable U.S. war equipment. Such a go might be examined as a provocative act by China, thing the present communistic management in Vietnam will select to escape. The present of a U.S. plane transporter in Da Nang, one that will be conduct as called liberty of navigate passages via the contested areas of the southward China Ocean, as well sends a potential provocation communication to China, but just a symbolical a. Today, U.S. expressions of anxiety above China's actions in the sea include had no discernible effect on the building of war means down there. The U.S. transporter hit team looks spectacular, but it is not precise which it can in fact do to constrain China. Though as Vietnam's top yellow medal delight observer the complete might of the superstate they one day fought now profitable trial as a would-be friend, they must stay careful of the ongoing historical change in the balance sheet of force in their area off of the joint state, in favor of China.